Who will die in the Until Dawn movie? If you're unaware, yep, they're filming a movie adaptation of the video game Until Dawn currently as we speak. And if you don't know what Until Dawn is, it's a video game where you can choose different choices for the characters to make, and depending on those choices, they can die or live. There are some endings where all the characters die, an ending where all the characters live, and all in between. So that got me thinking, if there's only one movie, there's gonna only be one ending. So who is going to die? Unless they pull a Clue and film different endings to put in different theaters and you don't know which ending you're gonna get, I think that would be sick, but I don't think they're gonna do that. So here's what I think. And speaking of me, I was a huge Until Dawn head. I watched so many Let's Players do so many different playthroughs so I can see the different endings because I didn't own a PS4 at the time. And the only reason I bought a PS4 is just so I can play Until Dawn myself. Until Dawn is one of my favorite video games, so I feel knowledgeable to speak on the subject. Spoiler warning for the video game and possible spoiler warning for the movie because I think I got this correct. So let's start with the characters we know die for sure in the story no matter what you choose, which is Hannah and Beth, the twins at the beginning who really kick off the whole story. They die no matter what, so we know they're gone. Then we have Flamethrower Guy, aka apparently his name is Jack according to the wiki, but I'm just going to call him Flamethrower Guy. He dies 100% no matter what you do. So there we have 3 guaranteed deaths. Then we have Josh, who only has 2 outcomes. He could either die at the hands of Hannah's Wendigo form, or he becomes a Wendigo himself. Either way, he technically dies, but I'll get into which way I think the movie is going to go in a bit.
It was just a prank, Han. It was just a prank, Han. It was just a prank, Han.
So we have our characters who we know 100% are going to die, but do we have any characters that we know 100% are going to live? I say yes, that being Mike and Sam. It is impossible to get their characters killed in the video game until the very, very end when they're flipping on the light switch at the cabin, and that's when anyone can die. Mike especially has a lot of lore in his sections of the video game, so I'm very confident in saying Sam and Mike will not die. So that means on the chopping block are Chris, Ashley, Emily, Matt, and Jessica. So here's what I think is going to happen to each of those characters. Starting off with Jessica, she is the character who can die first in the video game. It's when she's at the door and the Wendigo hand grabs her head and drags her out, and you're playing as Mike, and if you don't do the quick time events or you take the slow paths, then she will die at the hands of the Wendigo. And if you do it successfully, then she just falls down the mine shaft and wakes up a lot later into the story. Looking at this from a movie perspective, when Jessica, if she lives, she wakes up in the mines, and if Matt is still alive, she encounters him too, and the two of them, just sneak past Wendigos and then exit the cave and see the sunrise. This is a bit anticlimactic when you juxtapose that to the climax that's happening inside the cabin, and I don't think the movie is going to cut back and forth between what's happening with Jessica and Matt and what's happening in the cabin, because what's happening in the cabin is a lot more suspenseful. So for that reason, I think Jessica is most likely going to die. And if she does live, I don't think they're going to give her the ending of her just waking up in the cave and walking outside. I think they're going to have her join the group back at the cabin somehow. And therefore, if she does live, then her and Mike can have a sweet little reunion. So my educated guess is going to be that Jessica will die first when she is kidnapped by the Wendigo at the beginning with Mike. I think it makes the most sense for her just to die here. I think it kicks off the horror elements of the story nice and early. It sets up the Wendigo as a real threat, and I just don't think the writers will want to deal with her later on in the story. Also, I know some of the movie is cast. I don't know if they cast who's Jessica yet, but I think you can cast like someone pretty famous to play her since she's only going to be in the beginning of the movie. Like, I think it would be funny if Sydney Sweeney played her and then just immediately died like 20 minutes in. I think that would be great. In my professional opinion, I'd give Jessica a 15% chance of survival. Next up, we have Matt, who can die in several ways. First off, he can fall off the cliff when the elk are like surrounding him. Then we have him dying at the hands of the Wendigo when the fire tower falls, or later on when he meets up with Jessica, if she is still alive, he can die by a Wendigo in that section as well. I think Matt and Jessica are sort of like a combo deal. If one of them dies, the other one has to, and if one of them lives, the other one also has to. So if Jessica is dying, I think it makes sense for Matt to die as well, just so we don't have to deal with either of them in the climax or the third act. We'll keep him alive long enough for him and Emily to have that good banter between them. So my prediction for the movie is that Matt will die when the fire tower falls. He's going to try and save Emily, but eventually just choose to save himself, jump off to safety, and then die at the hands of the Wendigo. I think, again, it really establishes the Wendigo as this big threat, because Jessica was maybe a little easy pick off, but now once Matt dies, people know it's serious. Also, if Matt doesn't die at this point, then we're going to go a really long time without someone dying, and in a horror movie, you'd want kind of these consistent deaths. So it makes sense for Matt to die, and at that point specifically. And that's why I'm giving Matt a 20% chance of survival. Speaking of Emily, she can die in so many different ways. I think she might have the most chances of death throughout the game than any other character. She can die in the mines at the hands of the Wendigo. She can get crushed by like the sawmill grinder thing. She can get shot by Mike, or she can just get caught up in the cabin explosion at the end. We know that in the game, the story keeps her alive until the fire tower falls and she's in the mine and she meets the flamethrower guy, and that's when we get a bunch of plot stuff happening. So she'll live through then. I think we need to keep her alive at the very least until Mike pulls a gun on her when she gets bit, because I think that is peak drama. That would make a great scene in the movie. Mike pulling the gun out on Emily. You don't know what to do. You don't know who to trust. You don't know what's going on. It makes a great scene in the video game, so it should make a great scene in the movie, and I really want to see that scene in the movie. So we're going to keep her alive, at least up until that point, meaning the only other time she can die is in the big house explosion, and I don't think anyone is going to die in the big explosion at the end, because at that point, I think it makes sense to have all your characters live for a big happy ending, which is why I'm actually predicting that Emily will survive the movie. That's right, I know she's the most hated character in the game, but I think it just makes sense to keep her alive. That way she can actually have a good character arc, like sort of like she does in the video game. She goes from being this really mean, cold-hearted, materialistic person, and through the trials and tribulations, maybe comes out a better person when she has to use her designer belt as a torch. So I'm saying Emily has an 80% chance of surviving in the movie. The only 20% chance would just be if they want to give fan service and kill Emily in some really gory, gruesome way as like a inside joke moment of ha ha ha, we all hate Emily. So that's why it's 80% and not any higher. Then we have the comedic relief Chris, who can die when he's looking for Josh with the flamethrower guy. This is when the flamethrower guy dies too, so he can also die at this part at the hands of the Wendigo. He can die in the sewer if the Wendigo is mimicking Ashley, and he can go over there to see what's happening and then dies at the Wendigo, or he can just die in the big cabin explosion. Here's what I think is going to happen with Chris. Since it's a movie, we need some romance. Every movie needs a little romance, so we are going to have the ending where Chris and Ashley announce their feelings for each other, and it's going to be nice, it's going to be sweet during the big, he has to choose someone to shoot part. He's not going to shoot Ashley. It's going to be sweet, and they're going to admit their feelings for each other. But like every wholesome couple in movies, one of them has to die, and I'm choosing Chris. I'm going to say Chris is going to die when he's out looking for Josh with the flamethrower guy. The flamethrower guy will die, and then Chris will come running back to the lodge. Ashley is going to see him through the window, and since we have the happy ending, Ashley is ready to open the door for him, but he's not fast enough. He didn't do the quick time events, and the Wendigo is going to kill him with Ashley watching through the window, watching her lover die. I think this is peak drama. I know maybe some will find it unsatisfying that one of them dies just right after they announce their feelings for each other. But hey, it's a horror movie. Usually the comedic relief dies, so I'm using that educated guess for what's going to happen here. And I think if he dies, it's gonna make the most sense for it to happen while Ashley is watching. That's why I'm giving Chris a 40% chance of survival. Speaking of Ashley, let's talk about her. She can only die in 2 ways. One of them is when she hears the Wendigo mimicking in the sewer, and the other way is just in the lodge explosion. So since we killed Chris, I think it makes the most sense to keep Ashley alive. I think it would just be too sad if both of them died, and she can live on with the trauma of watching her crush die, because I think that's a worse fate than death. But I do want to still incorporate the Wendigo's mimic powers in the sewer, because really that sewer part is really the only time we hear the Wendigo mimicking, and so I think it would be really cool if when Ashley's walking in the sewer, she hears the Wendigo mimic. In the game, it's usually Jessica's voice that she hears, but I think in the movie, it might be cool to be Chris's voice, because she just watched Chris die, and now she's hearing him again from maybe beyond the grave, and she's delirious. She doesn't want to keep going anymore. She just wants to be held by Chris, and so she's going to be drawn to Chris's voice in the mimic. And then I think we can have a Wendigo jump scare at that moment, but she won't die from the Wendigo, and all the other characters can pull her out of it, and maybe it's a really cool chase scene, but in the end, everyone's going to live from that encounter. I think whether or not Ashley lives is very much dependent on if Chris dies. So if Chris doesn't die, I'm going to give her a 50% chance of survival, but if Chris does die, I think that ups it to 70%. Then lastly, we have Josh, which is basically a 50-50. Which way is it going to go? Is he going to be killed by the Hannah Wendigo, or is he going to be spared by the Hannah Wendigo and then become one later on? I think it just dramatically, in a story sense, it's just better to have him turn into a Wendigo. On one hand, it can be sort of cathartic when the bad guy dies. He put his friends through so much this night. It would be nice seeing him just die. But on the other hand, one could say, being a Wendigo is worse than death. And I think that is the better ending. It's the more interesting and dramatic one thematically. So I am giving a 90% chance of Josh turning into a Wendigo. Just to round off the cast, let's circle back to Sam and Mike. I am giving Sam a 100% survival rate, and I am giving Mike a 100% survival rate. So I'm predicting the people who will survive in the movie are Mike, Sam, Emily, and Ashley. So that means this is who I think will die in the movie in order. Hannah and Beth, then Jessica, then Matt, then Flamethrower Guy, then Chris, and then Josh turns into a Wendigo. So there is a total of 6 deaths, but since this is a horror movie, people want kills, people want gore. I'm going to add in a special 7th one that isn't in the video game. I think during a dream sequence with Josh and Dr. Hill, I think Josh can kill Dr. Hill in one of those dream sequences, like the very last one. Josh is psychologically snapped. He's had enough of these visions of Dr. Hill yelling at him, so he's going to kill Dr. Hill in his dreams, and therefore we can actually see Josh kill someone, even if it is just a dream, because all the other deaths are Wendigo related. So it'd be nice to, 1, see Josh kill someone, and 2, just have an extra death there in the movie. So those are the people who I think will die in the Until Dawn movie at the hands of the Wendigo. Tell me, who do you think will die in the movie? Tell me in the comments. And speaking of Wendigos, don't they look eerily similar to this creature from the movie The Descent? Ever think about that? Well, check out the video I just did about The Descent and why the monsters aren't a metaphor for anything. Interesting, huh?
It was just a prank, Han.